Friends of YouTube, this is the terrifying story of Domingo, a person who asks for the help of Santa Muerte and suffers the consequences of not fulfilling the agreement. Please support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Santa Muerte collects on a favor granted. The house of Domingo was nothing more than a shell of rotting wood and withered dreams located on the outskirts of a town that time had forgotten. The air there always smelled of dampness and rancidity. But the night Domingo decided to invoke the Nina Blanca, the white girl, the atmosphere became dense, almost solid, as if the oxygen had turned into mercury. Domingo, with calloused hands and a soul blackened by envy toward those who had bread on their table, traced a circle of black salt in the basement. He whispered words that had been inherited from a grandfather who died screaming, and in front of him, the effigy of the Holy Death seemed to stretch, gaining an inhuman height. "Give me what is mine," Domingo pleaded, his forehead pressed against the cold floor. "My children are starving. My wife looks at me with pity. I want power. I want this town to bow before me." The response was not a voice, but a vibration that shook his teeth. The Holy Death accepted, but the contract was carved into his mind with fire. For the scales to remain balanced, a branch of your tree must be cut by your own hand. Choose one, or I shall choose them all. Domingo, blinded by the promise of wealth, nodded, stupidly believing that when the time came, he would find a way out, or that his love for his family would be a sufficient shield. The next morning, the dark miracle manifested. Domingo found a vein of pure gold in the garden that seemed to sprout from the earth like an open wound. Within weeks, misery was replaced by an obscene opulence. He built a mansion over the ruins of his old hut, a structure of black marble and smoked glass. Araceli, his wife, went from being a hard-working woman to a jeweled shadow. The money did not bring her joy, but instead sowed a constant paranoia. She felt that the jewelry burned her skin and that the mansion's water tasted of iron, of blood. His children, Damien and Vrenda, grew up surrounded by luxury but inhabited by a terrifying emptiness. Damien became a cruel young man, trying to fill the silence, inhabiting the rooms of the house with sadism, while Vrenda sank into a selective mutism, drawing skeletal figures on the silk walls of her bedroom. Their cousin, Patrick, a cheerful young man who came from the city to celebrate his uncle's new fortune, was the first to notice that the shadows in the house moved in the opposite direction of the light. The Holy Death's deadline fell at the end of the 9th month. Domingo tried to ignore the signs, the crying of crows slamming against the windows and the smell of decomposing flesh emanating from the faucets. On the designated night, the family organized a dinner to feign normalcy. Among the guests were Avraham, Domingo's accountant, who knew too much about the origin of his money, Dominic, a young protege of the family, and Perla, the distant niece who served as a lady-in-waiting for Araceli. When the grandfather clock struck midnight, a dull thud shook the foundations. Domingo felt a sharp pain in his chest. The white girl was there, invisible to everyone except him, standing behind his chair, her scythe brushing Damien's neck. "Choose, Domingo," the void whispered. Domingo looked at his son Damien, then at sweet Renda, and finally at Araceli. Terror paralyzed him. The selfishness that led him to ask for the favor turned into a paralyzing cowardice. "I can't," he groaned. "I will not choose any. Take my life. Your life is not worth the debt," the entity replied, because Domingo did not deliver the voluntary sacrifice. The Holy Death decided to collect her interest with a violence that defied the laws of physics. The dinner turned into a slaughterhouse. Avraham was the first. His eyes liquefied and popped out of their sockets as he screamed, and his body began to bend backward with such force that his spine exploded, piercing through his own skin like splinters of white wood. Perla, seized by panic, tried to run for the exit, but the carpets turned into quicksand of hot tar that sucked her in while her lungs filled with black mud before the horrified eyes of the others. Dominic tried to use a silver knife to defend himself against the invisible, but the weapon melted in his hand, welding the metal to his bones in an agony that made him collapse as his skin blistered and fell away in shreds. Patrick, trying to protect Vrenda, was thrown against a large mirror that did not break. Instead, the glass became liquid and swallowed him, leaving him trapped inside the surface, banging on the glass from the inside while his face deformed in an eternal soundless scream. Domingo screamed, begging for mercy, but the darkness had already claimed his family. Araceli began to age at an unnatural speed. Her hair fell out in grey clumps, and her skin clung to her bones until she became a living corpse that still tried to call for her husband with a voice that was only a hiss of dry air. Damien and Vrenda, the children for whom Domingo had supposedly asked for the miracle, suffered the cruelest fate. their bodies intertwined and fused into an amorphous mass of flesh and screams, a two-headed creature that crawled across the black marble seeking forgiveness from a father who had condemned them. The mansion did not collapse, it transformed into a sealed mausoleum. The Holy Death kept her word. Domingo remained rich, but now he inhabited a house where time did not pass and where the mutilated remains of his loved ones regenerated every morning only to be tortured again at sunset. Domingo cannot die, he cannot leave, and he cannot close his eyes. He lives in the center of a feast of viscera and wails, holding gold coins that burn like embers, while the shadow of the scythe reminds him